I was 19 when I moved to my grandparents' old farmhouse in rural Nebraska, a place so far from anything that the nearest neighbor was a mile down a dirt road, and the only sounds at night were the crickets and the wind whispering through the cornfields. I just dropped out of college, burned out and broke, my head a mess of half-baked plans and regrets. My grandparents, kind and weathered from years of working the land, offered me their spare room while I figured things out. The farmhouse was ancient, with creaky floors, peeling wallpaper, and windows that rattled like they were gossiping with the wind. It smelled of dust and old wood, but it felt safe, like a warm blanket stitched with memories of simpler times. I thought it was the perfect place to hit reset. I was wrong. The first few weeks were quiet, almost peaceful. My days were spent helping my grandpa with chores, mending fences, feeding the chickens, hauling buckets of grain for the cows. It was hard work, but it kept my mind off the mess I'd made of my life. At night, I'd collapse onto the lumpy mattress in the spare room, scrolling through my phone or flipping through old paperback thrillers I'd found in the attic. The house sat at the edge of a massive cornfield, the kind that stretched so far it seemed to swallow the horizon. During the day, it was golden and alive, swaying under the sun, but at night it was different. The field turned into a sea of shadows, so dark you couldn't tell where the corn ended and the sky began. I'd sit on the porch sometimes, nursing a beer, staring out at it, feeling like I was the only person left in the world. It was late August, the air thick and sticky when I started noticing something off. I'd be out on the porch around midnight, the world quiet except for the hum of insects when I'd get this feeling. It wasn't anything I could pinpoint at first, just a prickle on the back of my neck, like someone was watching me from far away. My eyes would dart to the field, but it was too dark to see anything, just the faint rustle of corn stalks swaying in the breeze. I'd shake it off, tell myself it was the isolation playing tricks on me. I'd grown up in a small town, but this was different out here. The silence had weight, like it was pressing down on you. Still, I ignored it. Until the night I saw him. It was a Friday. Close to 1 a.m. I was on the porch, scrolling through my phone. The glow of the screen, the only light besides the dim bulb above the door. I heard at first a faint crunch, like footsteps on the gravel driveway that stretched from the house to the field. I froze, my thumb hovering over the screen. The sound came again, slow and deliberate. Crunch, crunch. My heart gave a little kick, and I set my phone down, leaning forward to peer into the darkness. The driveway was about 20 yards long, ending where the corn began. That's where I saw it, a shape, tall and humanoid, standing just beyond the reach of the porch light. It was too far to make out details, but it was wrong. The proportions were off, like its arms were too long, its head too small. It stood perfectly still, facing the house, like it was waiting for something. My mouth went dry. My first thought was that it was a neighbor, maybe someone lost or drunk. But who'd be out here at this hour? The nearest house was a mile away, and no one just wandered through the fields at night. I grabbed the flashlight from the porch table, my hands already shaking, and flicked it on. The beam cut through the dark, catching the figure for a split second before it moved fast, unnaturally fast, darting into the corn. The stalks parted and closed behind it like the field had swallowed it whole. The rustling stopped and the night went quiet again, but it wasn't the same. The air felt heavier, like it was holding its breath, waiting for me to make a move. I didn't sleep that night. I locked the front door, checked every window, and sat on the couch with a kitchen knife in my hand, the kind you'd use to chop carrots, not fight off. Whatever that was. My grandparents were asleep upstairs, their snores drifting down the hall. I didn't wake them. They were old, frail, and I didn't want to scare them over something I wasn't even sure I'd seen. Maybe it was a deer, or my eyes playing tricks in the dark. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. That figure wasn't an animal, and it wasn't my imagination. It had been watching me. The next day, I tried to act normal. I helped my grandpa fix a tractor, nodding along as he grumbled about the weather, but my mind was elsewhere. I kept glancing at the field, half expecting to see that shape again in broad daylight. The corn looked innocent under the sun, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was out there, waiting for night to fall. I told myself I was being paranoid, that I'd just spooked myself. But I stayed inside that evening, keeping the curtains drawn and the TV on low to drown out the silence. Around 1 a.m., it started again. Crunch, crunch, crunch. Closer this time, right outside the house. I crept to the living room window, my heart hammering so loud I thought it'd wake my grandparents. I pulled the curtain back just enough to peek out. The porch light was off. I hadn't turned it off. In the faint moonlight I saw him. He was closer now, standing just beyond the driveway, at the edge of the grass. His head was tilted like he was listening or maybe studying the house. His arms hung limp at his sides, swaying slightly like they weren't attached right. I couldn't see his face, but I could feel his eyes on me. Boring through the glass like needles, I dropped the curtain and backed away, my breath coming in short, panicked gasps. I wanted to scream to wake my grandparents, but my voice was stuck in my throat. The footsteps started again, circling the house. Crunch, crunch, crunch. Slow, methodical, like he was taking his time, savoring it. I grabbed the knife from the kitchen counter and stood in the middle of the living room, listening as the sound moved from the front of the house to the side, then to the back. It stopped right outside the kitchen door. I held my breath, waiting for a knock, a scratch, anything. But there was nothing, just silence, thick and suffocating. I don't know how long I stood there, clutching that knife, my knuckles white, but eventually, I heard the footsteps retreat, fading back into the field. I didn't move until the sun came up, painting the walls with soft pink light. When I finally worked up the nerve to check the porch, I found something that made my stomach drop. There, in the dirt by the steps, were footprints. Bare feet, human-like, but too big with toes that looked wrong, like they were bent at odd angles, curling inward. They led from the driveway to the house and back like he'd been pacing. Around us all night, circling us like a predator. I didn't tell my grandparents. I couldn't. They loved that house, had lived there for decades, raised my mom there. I didn't want them to think I was losing it, or worse, scare them into leaving their home. Instead, I threw myself into research. I scoured the internet, digging through local forums and old newspaper archives. I found whispers of stories about the man in the fields, a figure seen for decades in rural Nebraska, always at night, always at the edge of the corn. Some called him a ghost, others a drifter who'd gone mad and lived in the fields like an animal. One old forum post buried in a thread from 2003 called him the Watcher. It said he'd pick a house and just watch it for nights on end, standing at the edge of the property, never crossing the line. The post didn't say why, but it mentioned something worse: families who'd seen him for too long would disappear. Their houses left empty, like they'd never been there. The word disappear stuck with me, clawing at my thoughts. I started sleeping with the lights on, checking the locks obsessively. I told my grandparents I wasn't feeling well, stayed in my room most of the day, but I couldn't avoid the nights. The footsteps came back, every night, closer each time. Sometimes I'd hear a low hum, like a voice too deep to make out, vibrating through the walls. Other times I'd catch a glimpse of him from the window, just a shadow at the edge of the field. Swaying like the corn, I decided I'd had enough. I wasn't going to let this thing, whatever it was, drive me out of my mind. I borrowed my grandpa's old hunting rifle, a heavy thing with a scratched wooden stock, and checked it was loaded. That night I sat by the living room window, the lights off, the rifle across my lap. I told myself I was being proactive, taking control. Midnight came, and so did the footsteps. Crunch, crunch, crunch. They stopped at the edge of the driveway, closer than ever. I peered through the curtain, my hands sweaty on the rifle. He was there, standing in the middle of the driveway, his head tilted up like he was looking right at my window. I couldn't see his face, but I swear I felt him smile, a cold, knowing grin that made my skin crawl. I raised the rifle, my hands shaking so bad I could barely aim. I flicked on the porch light, hoping to scare him off. The bulb flickered, buzzed, then died. In that split second of light, I saw him move, darting toward the house, his limbs jerking like a marionette with cut strings. I stumbled back, the rifle slipping from my hands, clattering to the floor. The footsteps were on the porch now, heavy, deliberate. Thud, thud, thud. The doorknob rattled, slow at first, then faster, like he was testing it, teasing me. I backed into the hallway, my breath hitching, my mind screaming at me to run, to hide, to do something. I ran upstairs, woke my grandparents, and told them someone was trying to break in. My grandpa, groggy but stern, grabbed his shotgun, and we barricaded ourselves in their bedroom, pushing a dresser against the door. We called 911, but the sheriff's station was 30 minutes away, out in the next town. The rattling stopped, but the footsteps didn't. They circled the house, over and over, slow and relentless, like he was taunting us. Thump, thud, crunch. My grandma clutched my hand, her face pale, whispering prayers under her breath. My grandpa stood by the door, shotgun ready, his jaw tight. We stayed like that until dawn. When the footsteps finally faded, the sheriff arrived. Just after sunrise, a tired-looking man with a mustache and a notepad. He walked the property, found the footprints, dozens of them, circling the house in a perfect loop. He said it was probably a prank, some local kid messing with us, but his voice was unsteady and he wouldn't meet my eyes. He took pictures of the prints and left, promising to look into it. I knew he wouldn't. We moved out the next week. My grandparents sold the farm to a developer who turned it into a subdivision. I never went back. I got a job in Omaha, tried to rebuild my life, but the night stayed with me. Sometimes, when I'm alone in my apartment, I hear it crunch, crunch, crunch like gravel under bare feet. I keep the curtains drawn, the door's locked, but I know he's still out there, somewhere at the edge of some other field, watching, waiting. Back in 2013, I was 24, fresh out of community college, and stuck working the graveyard shift at a 24, our gas station off a lonely highway in northern Michigan. It was the kind of place you'd miss if you blinked, tucked between dense woods and a two-lane road that saw more deer than cars after midnight. The station was a fluorescent lit box with scratched windows, a flickering neon sign, and coolers that hummed like they were gossiping about the night. I didn't mind the job at first. The pay was lousy, but it was quiet, and I could read or listen to music between the occasional trucker or lost tourist. I'd always been a night owl, so the solitude felt like a perk. That changed in the fall, when the nights grew long and cold, and the static started talking. It started with the radio. We had this ancient AM/FM unit behind the counter, always tuned to a classic rock station to keep the place from feeling like a tomb. One night in early October, around 2 a.m., I was restocking the cigarette display when the music cut out. No fade, no warning, just a low hum and a crackle of static like someone had yanked the antenna. I sighed, figuring the signal had dropped, which happens sometimes out here where the woods seem to eat radio waves. I walked over, fiddled with the dial, but the static only got louder, a harsh buzz that made my ears ache. Then through the noise, I heard it, a voice, faint and garbled like a whisper through a bad phone line. It said my name, Sarah. I froze, my hand still on the dial. My heart gave a sharp thud like it was trying to jump out of my chest. I lived alone in a one-bedroom apartment 20 miles away, and I hadn't told anyone at work my name beyond the NAMA tag pinned to my uniform. No one was in the store, just me, the coolers, and that damn radio. I turned it off, the silence hitting me like a wave. It wasn't a comforting silence, though. It was heavy, oppressive, like the air was holding its breath. I checked the security cameras, my hands shaking as I clicked through the grainy feeds. The parking lot was empty, the pumps glowing under the flickering neon sign. Beyond that, the woods were a wall of black, swallowing the light. I told myself I'd imagined it, that the radio had picked up some weird signal, maybe a CB from a trucker passing through. But my skin was crawling, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. I stayed behind the counter the rest of the shift, keeping the lights on full blast and my eyes on the door. No one came in, but I kept glancing at the windows, half expecting to see someone standing there, staring. When my shift ended at 6 a.m., I practically ran to my car, the dawn light barely cutting through the fog. I didn't turn the radio on during the drive home. I didn't want to hear anything. The next night, I went back telling myself it was a one-off, a fluke. I needed the job. Rent wasn't going to pay itself, and I was already behind on my student loans. But I was on edge, jumping at every sound, the hum of the coolers, the creak of the floor, the wind rattling the windows. Around 2 a.m. it happened. Again, the radio cut out, the static roared back, and there was that voice, clearer this time. Sarah, come outside. It was low, raspy, like someone who hadn't spoken in years. I yanked the plug from the wall, my hands shaking so bad. I nearly dropped it. The silence was worse than the static, like the store was waiting for something to happen. I checked the cameras again, nothing but the empty lot and the dark woods. I locked the front door even though we weren't supposed to, and sat behind the counter, clutching my phone like a lifeline. I didn't sleep that day, just lay in bed staring at the ceiling. Replaying that voice in my head, I told my manager Greg when I saw him next. He was a gruff guy in his 50s, always chewing gum and complaining about inventory. He laughed it off, said the radio was older than dirt and probably picking up stray signals from God knows where. "You're working too many nights, kid," he said, clapping me on the shoulder. "It's messing with your head." I wanted to believe him, so I let him talk me into bringing my own Bluetooth speaker for music. I figured a modern device, something I controlled, would fix it. I was wrong. The next night, I set up my speaker, playing a playlist of upbeat pop songs to keep the mood light. It worked for a while until 2 a.m. the music cut out, replaced by a blast of static so loud it made my ears ring. I fumbled with the speaker, trying to turn it off, but the static kept going and there was that voice again. "Sarah, open the door." It was louder now, almost pleading, but there was something wrong with it, something that made my stomach twist. I ripped the battery out of the speaker and threw it in the trash can under the counter. My hands were shaking, my breath coming in short gasps. I checked the cameras, the door, the windows, nothing. But I could feel it, that same heavy presence, like the air was thicker. Like something was pressing in from all sides. I started dreading my shifts. I'd keep every light on, check the cameras obsessively, avoid looking at the windows. But the voice didn't need the radio anymore. It started coming from other places. The hum of the coolers, the buzz of the neon sign outside, even the faint whine of the security system. Always at 2 a.m., always the same raspy whisper, "Sarah, let me in." It was like it knew I was there, like it was speaking directly to me. I stopped sleeping during the day, too afraid of what I'd hear in the quiet of my apartment. I started seeing things, shadows moving in the parking lot, shapes in the woods that disappeared when I blinked. Once, I swore I saw a face pressed against the window, pale and featureless, gone in an instant. I told myself it was exhaustion, that I was losing it, but it felt too real. I confided in my coworker Mike, who worked the morning shift. He was a big guy, ex-military, with a no-nonsense attitude and a laugh that could fill the room. I expected him to tease me, but he listened, his face serious. He offered to swap shifts with me for one night, said he'd see if anything weird happened. I was desperate for a break, so I agreed. That night I stayed home, curled up on my couch with the TV on, but I couldn't relax. I kept checking my phone, waiting for Mike to text. At 2:17 a.m., he called. His voice was shaking, not at all like the confident guy I knew. "Sarah, what the hell is going on at that place?" He said he'd heard it too, his name, whispered, through the static of the security system. He'd seen something outside, a figure standing at the edge of the parking lot, motionless, staring at the store. He wouldn't say more, just told me he was done. He quit the next day, didn't even pick up his last paycheck. I couldn't afford to quit. My bills were piling up, and I had nowhere else to go. So I kept working, but I started bringing a knife. From home, a small switchblade I kept hidden under the counter. I stopped looking at the windows, stopped checking the cameras. I just focused on surviving each shift, counting down the hours until dawn. But the voice got bolder, louder, like it knew I was breaking. It wasn't just my name anymore. It was sentences, demands. "Sarah, open the door. Let me in, I'm waiting." It came from everywhere, the coolers, the lights, the air itself. I started wearing earplugs, but it didn't help. The voice was inside my head, or maybe it was the store, the whole damn place alive with it. One night it went too far. It was a freezing November night, the kind where the cold seeps through the walls. I was restocking the energy drinks, trying to keep busy, when the lights flickered. The static came back, not from any one source but everywhere, a deafening roar that made my teeth ache. Then the voice screamed, "Sarah, let me in." It wasn't a whisper anymore, it was a howl, raw and desperate, shaking the walls. I dropped to the floor, covering my ears, tears streaming down my face. The lights flickered again, and the front door rattled, like something was slamming against it, over and over. I crawled to the back room, locked the door, and curled up in the corner, sobbing, praying for it to stop. I stayed there until dawn, when the world felt normal again. My boss found me in the morning, still shaking, my face streaked with tears. I told him everything, begged him to check the cameras. He did, but the footage from 2 a.m. onward was corrupted hours of static, like the system had been wiped. He fired me that day, said I was scaring customers and needed help. I didn't argue. I moved out of town a month later, got a job at a grocery store in broad daylight, where the only sounds were chatter and the beep of scanners. I haven't heard the voice since, but I don't trust silence anymore. I don't listen to radios, don't use speakers. I keep the lights on at night, and I never ever work alone. In the fall of 2008, I was a 26-year-old grad student in Boston, scraping by on a teaching assistant's stipend that barely covered my coffee addiction, let alone rent in a city that chewed up dreamers like me. Boston's housing market was a nightmare, cramped studios going for more than my monthly pay. So, when I found a one-bedroom apartment in a crumbling brownstone on the edge of the city for $500 a month, utilities included, I thought I'd hit the jackpot. The landlord was a twitchy guy named Carl, with sweat stains under his armpits and a habit of glancing over his shoulder like someone was watching. He kept muttering about what a steal the place was, urging me to sign the lease before someone else snatched it. The apartment was a damp walls, stained ceilings, a faint whiff of mildew that clung to everything, but it was mine. I signed the papers that day, ignoring the little voice in my head that said something wasn't right. I should have listened. The brownstone was old, the kind of place that looked like it had stories carved into its bones. The stairs creaked, like they were groaning under the weight of a century, and the hallways smelled of dust and forgotten lives. My apartment was on the second floor with warped wooden floors, a single window overlooking a weedy backyard, and walls that seemed to sweat when it rained. I moved in with a duffel bag of clothes, a laptop, and a thrift store lamp, figuring I'd make it home. That first night I noticed the noises. Old houses creak, right? But these were different, low, rhythmic, like a heartbeat pulsing through. The walls. Thump, 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 thump. It was faint, easy to dismiss as pipes or the building settling. I cranked up my music, unpacked my books, and told myself it was nothing. But it wasn't nothing. The noises came every night, always around 3 a.m., when the city outside went dead quiet. Thump, 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 thump. It wasn't just a sound, it was a vibration, like the house was alive, breathing with me in the dark. I'd lie in bed, staring at the ceiling, trying to pinpoint where it was coming from. The walls, the floor, the ceiling. It seemed to move like it was circling me. I started noticing other things too. My keys would vanish from the kitchen counter and turn up on the coffee table. My laptop would be open when I'd sworn I'd shut it down. Once, I found a glass of water I'd left on my nightstand tipped over. The water pooling on the floor in a perfect circle, like someone had drawn it with a compass. I laughed it off, blamed my sleep-deprived brain. But the unease was growing, a knot in my gut that tightened with every night. A week in, I asked Carl about the noises. He was in the hallway, fixing a flickering light bulb, and his face went pale when I mentioned the heartbeat sound. "Old houses?" he mumbled, not meeting my eyes. "They got character, you know? Pipes, drafts, that kind of thing." I pressed him, asked if anyone else had complained. He hesitated, then admitted the previous tenant had left in a hurry, didn't even collect his deposit. "People these days, they don't appreciate history," he said, and changed the subject. I let it go, but his words stuck with me. Like a splinter I couldn't dig out, I started digging into the building's past, spending late nights on my laptop, scouring old records and local forums. Boston's full of haunted house stories, but this one had a shadow over it. The brownstone had been a boarding house in the 1870s, run by a doctor named Elias Hawthorne. He wasn't your kindly neighborhood physician. Hawthorne was known for experimental surgeries in the basement, procedures that sounded more like torture than medicine. Dozens of patients went in, few came out. The house was abandoned. After a fire in '83, left empty for decades until it was converted into apartments in the '90s, tenants never stayed long. One article mentioned a woman in the '70s who claimed the walls whispered to her. Another, from the early 2000s, described a man who fled after seeing shadows that moved on their own. I told myself it was just urban legend nonsense, kind of thing people invent to spook each other. But the thump-thump in the walls said otherwise. The noises got worse, louder, more insistent, like the house was trying to tell me something or warn me. I'd wake up at 3 a.m., heart pounding to that relentless heartbeat, now joined by a new sound, scratching like nails, dragging across wood. It started under my bed, slow and deliberate, then moved up the walls, across the ceiling, stopping right above me. I'd lie there, frozen, my breath shallow, waiting for it to stop. One night, I worked up the nerve to check under the bed, flashlight in hand, expecting to find a rat or a loose pipe. There was nothing, just dust and a faint, sour smell like something rotting just out of sight. The scratching came again the next night, louder, closer. Like it was clawing its way toward me, I started avoiding the apartment. I'd stay late at the university library, grading papers or pretending to study, anything to delay going home. But I couldn't avoid it forever. One night, I got back around midnight, exhausted from a long day of teaching and dodging questions about my bloodshot eyes. The air in the apartment felt wrong, heavy, like walking into a sauna. I flicked on the light and it buzzed, flickered, then died. In the dark, I heard it, a low, guttural moan like someone exhaling right behind me. I spun around, my heart in my throat, but no one was there. The moan came again, from the walls this time, followed by the heartbeat, thump, 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 thump. I grabbed my phone, using the flashlight to navigate to the kitchen. The walls were sweating, beads of water running down like the house was crying. My hands shook as I poured a glass of water, trying to calm myself, but the glass slipped, shattering on the floor. The sound echoed and the heartbeat stopped, replaced by a whisper so faint I thought I'd imagined it. I froze, my breath catching. The whisper came again, clearer now, from the direction of the hallway. It wasn't human, not quite. It was too low, too hollow, like it was coming from the house itself. I'd backed toward the front door, my phone's flashlight shaking in my hand. That's when I noticed the basement door, tucked at the end of the hallway. It was always locked, a heavy wooden thing with a rusted knob, but that night it was cracked, open just an inch. A cold, damp breeze leaked out, carrying that same sour smell I'd caught under the bed. My gut screamed at me to run, to get out and never come back. But something pulled me toward that door, a sick curiosity, like I needed to know what was down there. I pushed the door open, the hinges groaning like they hadn't moved in years. The stairs were narrow, wooden, descending into a blackness that seemed to swallow my flashlight's beam. Each step creaked under my weight, the air growing colder, thicker with every inch. At the bottom, my light caught something marks on the concrete floor, deep scratches forming a perfect circle, like claw marks etched by something desperate to get out. The smell was overpowering now, rotting and sharp like decay and old blood. I stepped into the circle, not sure why, just compelled, like the house was guiding me. The air shifted, tightening around me, and the heartbeat stopped. The silence was deafening, pressing against my eardrums. Then that whisper again, right in my ear, "Stay." I bolted, tripping up the stairs, my flashlight clattering to the floor. I slammed the basement door behind me, grabbed my bag, and ran out of the apartment, not stopping until I was in my car, peeling down the street. I crashed at a friend's place that night, sleeping on her couch with the lights on. I didn't go back to the apartment for days, only returning with my friend Mike to grab my stuff. The place felt different in daylight, still creepy, but less alive. The basement door was locked again, and I didn't ask Carl for the key. I broke my lease, paid a penalty I couldn't afford, and moved into a shared house closer to campus. Carl didn't argue, he just nodded like he'd seen this before. He didn't refund my deposit, and I didn't care. I just wanted out. A year later, I drove by the brownstone on a whim. It was boarded up, condemned, the windows dark and the yard overgrown. I slowed my car, staring at my old apartment window. The curtains moved, just a flicker like someone had brushed past them. My heart stopped and I heard it, faint but unmistakable, carried on the wind, thump, 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 thump. I floored the gas and never looked back. I don't know what lived in that house, what breathed in those walls, but I know it wanted me to stay. And sometimes in the dead of night, when the world is too quiet, I hear it again, that heartbeat calling me back.